G'day folks, Mark here again for I suppose the post-election update. The election didn't go as many had hoped. I suppose realistically it went more as you'd really expect in the overall view. Whether in West Australia, whether that's too many people are still sleepwalking their way through this world or sheepalising through this world, or there's also a reasonable amount of the progressive side of things, but Labor back in with majority. Majority's been weakened a little bit, but bolstered by the Greens. So more people went to the Greens, which is, for our perspective, worse than Labor, and very much the progressive side of the world. And I won't get any more than that. I don't want to put any more people offside than that, but that's where we're at. In I suppose the overall perspective, to be truthful, the hope that an election was going to fix this firearm situation and the police and what they're up to with making law-abiding, changing laws to change people's, turn them into criminals out of simply a stroke of a pen, is obviously a dramatic situation to be in. And to think that an election was going to change that in any real sense, in an immediate sense, was really a bit of a Hail Mary was going on there. Although the political side of things has relevance, it needs to be with, in my opinion, it needs to be with other things. I suppose I'm not telling any stories of stuff I've been there before. But I suppose the landscape we're in, and I want to go through a couple of things, I suppose, is what to do for people right now. I'm not here to give legal advice, not here to even go through and break down the laws as to what they are. As I've mentioned before, as much as there's paperwork there, it hasn't all been interpreted fully yet. It certainly hasn't been actioned yet and hasn't been fought yet. So I can't tell you, and that's not my place. What I suppose, to go through the lay of the land for people who don't understand how serious this all is. The big picture is that the police have certainly, with ignoring some of the correct political process or parliamentary process, with breaking some rules in places but having no accountability, have forced something through that is certainly going to change this landscape a lot in many ways, from confiscation of firearms to listen, and there's bigger things coming, in my opinion, that are just inside the structure they've set up, or the regulations they've set up. But also, it's also been worded into to be changed instantly. The people who think that I'll just get compliant now and it'll be fine, and that'll be fine till next election, I don't believe that at all. It is set up to where, and not only through the way that things have been written, but also through the process we're sitting in, they forced things through and it happened. And the election was really not even a speed bump to them. But then there's 4 years of a majority government again where they can carry on. So this should be a real warning to, we're in this situation. To the rest of Australia, I guarantee you there are police forces all over this country that are salivating at the prospect of what they can do. This only really took 2.5, 3 years to get to this process, and they've got the ball rolling to where they have complete control. So this should be putting the hairs on the back of your neck up. If you are about freedoms, but particularly the firearms owners of Australia, this certainly is a warning shot to all of you, and it's time to wake up. If you haven't, if you think your state's wonderful, stop and think about what actually just happened here. Now, to explain a little bit of what actually just happened here, I suppose there is some good news at this. I'll get to the end of what I feel we should be doing and some good things to be involved with. So I'll get to there, but I want to explain a little bit more of where we're at in some places. Particularly, we have a state that has, via the previous Premier, which is Mark McGowan, set things up where he put the police force into various high status places. So our Governor General is ex-police commissioner for one of these things. So one of our checks and balances isn't there. So the police have had a freer rein or bigger grip on the reins than ever before. We have a police minister that has, this is personal to him in the sense of he's using this. This is, as a police minister, where they're not really capable of dealing with crime or with any of the big problems and that sort of stuff, they've fabricated a setup to go with, and there may be other agendas involved, but where to actually making the gun guys the extra bad guys, crime on the streets and guns on the streets and that sort of stuff, and we'll get those guns off the streets. This is a sales. This is his way to go forward in, from what I understand, what I believe, is heading for Premier of Western Australia. And this is the process. The government used it as their tool when it suited to help them with votes and that sort of stuff, but he's certainly using it as one of his platforms. Let's say I don't know enough to know the whole process, but it certainly is, we are definitely being stood on to get him to his next position. So he has skin in the game. This isn't just about law or about what's right and wrong. This is actually personal benefits out of doing that. We have a acting inspector in the police force, which is the head of the firearms reform team. He is acting, he's supposedly retiring, he's acting until this all goes through. When this all goes through, he gets to be inspector. He's no longer acting, he's an inspector. So I don't know if that's just how what he wears on his shoulder. I don't know if that's how he retires that. I don't know the other benefits. I don't know the other bits and pieces, but there is a personal gain to get out of this process. So not only to have a system in place. By the way, that gentleman was also employed years ago by the WA Police Department as a disarm the population police officer from the UK. So he's always been employed. I don't know his upgrade path. I don't know how he got to be the top of the group over here, but he was employed. He was employed that way. He was, employed that way with that agenda right from the beginning. And I don't know how far that goes back, but that's part of the insides of what's going on here. So there's been personal agendas that are attached to here. And then we can go into the other side of other things that are going on. The big picture is this is a perfect storm. It's why it's happened here so heavily in Western Australia, apart from West Australians being fairly compliant as well. But it has certainly happened with more moving pieces than maybe some people realise. So that's what's going on that side of things. The other side of things that I see very much so, a lot of people are saying, well, what about the group I'm in? The membership I've got in a firearms organisation, why aren't they fighting? Why aren't they doing anything? I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding of some of these organisations. You feel you're a member for it and they might run your club, or they might do a lot of facilitating of things, or all sorts of stuff that they do, which is what your membership's about, that side of things. And people are expecting them to fight for them. And I think in those cases, some of those groups are definitely, some are invited to the table with the police force. We do have a pretty big negative, is that some of the organisations kept other organisations away from the police force and the consultation or the process of the wheeling and dealing, which you certainly get the feeling goes on. It wasn't everyone represented properly by any means. That's stuff we've got to fix in the future, but my comment comes back to the people who are expecting those organisations to do more, to fight more, to come up with legal grounds of doing things, or fight like we hope they do. There's so many people say, well, the government shouldn't be able to do this, and the police force shouldn't be able to do this, and they're breaking this law and they're breaking that law. At the end of the day, none of it's been tested whatsoever. Those organisations aren't the organisations to do that. So I think there's a little bit of a common belief that everything's happening at Cannes and we're trying as hard as we can, where in actual fact we aren't. There's more things to happen, and that's what I should say on that level. The person I haven't mentioned before but is doing something, and I heard different rumours from different groups and that sort of stuff, but there's only one person that I know of that's really followed through, and that's a young lady called Kate, and she goes by Lady Liberty. Kate's got an interesting story of her own. She's very much a young lady who's fighting very much for every gun owner's rights in Western Australia, or all of Australia, but Western Australia. She comes from, and there's a story that involves her dad and firearms and things, and she has a lot of passion about this sort of stuff and put a lot of effort into it. The last election cycle, she stood tried to get into Parliament, didn't get enough support, not enough people, not enough shooters supported it, or people supported her to get in. But she didn't go away and lick her wounds and do something else. She has been trying to work out what to do, and she was the only person who actually said, back in February, just after the police had sort of done their onslaught with letters and bits and pieces around the place, we've started to try and organise funds to start a proper legal campaign, a legal process of doing this. Well, she's doing that. Now, put a link down below to the video where she explains a little bit of that, but also down to her channel. She's doing a GoFundMe to do this. She's managed to get the money together enough to go and do that, and she's talking about King's Council and talking about a legal team. So I presume that's looking at Crown law and how far inside or outside of that the police are and what they're operating, and normal law as to the, I presume, his level of going to the High Court. But where we all know that there's rules being broken, but are there actual laws that can be held against them or not? We are talking about a situation where the government, via the police force, the government has decided you can have X amount of a particular personal possession or private property. First time that's ever happened. Is that actually legal? And what are the ramifications of that? They then can, at a stroke of a pen, as it's seen here, they can tell you how many cars you can have, how many golf clubs you can have, how many, well, pretty much whatever it is they want to, how many you can have, because they've decided. This goes back to, this sounds like 1600 in the UK, where the local king says that your king says that no, you can't have any more than this. That's all you're allowed to have. This definitely sounds draconian in every sense, but they're also looking at the other side of this is straight up confiscation, so does it word, taking them from you. So with no compensation for them. So they've changed the laws to, with a stroke of a pen, these things are then worth nothing and you'll get nothing for it. So we're talking thousands to tens of thousands, in some cases hundreds of thousands. And they're also looking at the likes of a class action, which could be millions of dollars in class action. Now, the obvious, well, my real hope to go with that, and I'm sure their real hope to go with that, is that potentially coming up with a class action. And my real hope on top of that is, if you've got the potentials of a class action worth tens of millions of dollars, is that may be able to cause an injunction to where, okay, you've got to hold on. The police force, West Australian government, you have to hold on this, but because you have potentially a massive amount of money you're about to stumble into. Now, timing-wise, 3 weeks to try and do this before people become criminals unless they comply, I think is an impossible task. I also feel that there's probably a real problem in going further forward in a legal sense without some people falling, without some people having firearms confiscated, getting into the ugly side of things, because from the potential of a law versus a law that's enacted and actually being used, I think become a lot easier to try. I don't know. I should shut up. I'm not legal. I don't know that side of things. What I can tell you is Kate has raised that money with the GoFundMe. I'm certain they could do with a lot more. I'm certain that if it goes anywhere, that if it has any legs, which what they're finding out right now, that it's going to need a huge amount more. And I'd suggest for all West Australian firearms owners, or West Australians that are interested in the government not being able to take private property from you without compensation, and that's not just West Australians. Think about this, Australia. This is also coming for you. These guys pull this off and it goes forward. We change the landscape of Australia in the way of what the government's power over individuals. What we understood as fair and the right thing and what you should do, what you shouldn't be able to do, and they can, no, we'll just change that. With a stroke of a pen, we'll go into a different place where we now completely can take whatever we want, when we want, because we want. That's the situation. So I would think for all people, this is worthwhile sharing. That's a very valid cause. That's for me to stop talking about what Kate's up to there. Well done, Kate. She's doing a really good job. Go and check her channel out and see what's going on there. As I mentioned before, one of my thoughts on how we can do this in the way of actually stop the rest of what's potentially coming. I want to think about on the rest of what's coming. We know that they're planning on confiscating all these firearms. We know that they've confiscated previous firearms. They know they stopped the buyback, and they've decided, I heard recently, it's somewhere or other written in our laws, is that federally they have to compensate you. State-wise, they don't actually have to confiscate you, which has that figure. That's something we need to address. But that is also to the point where they now have proven that. They have stopped the buyback, had a little suggested one for no money whatsoever, but had a little suggestion, stopped it, and still taking firearms. So they've tested the water on this sort of stuff. They're doing a lot of testing the water if you stop and think about what they can get away with. And no one's challenging them. So Kate's challenging, that's a start. But think about this. They've also changed the rules to where our property letter system, which I always thought was a terrible system, by the way, but our property letter system is being changed. So they're going to get a property letter now, a private property owner or a primary producer, wherever you go to shoot, they need to register. So they need to willingly get themselves tracked and on the firearms process. They need to do that. And they're largely, I think it's going to be down to 10 firearms, 10 owners is all they can have, or 10 shooters is all they can have, or no, is it 5 shooters is all they can have? For good, forever, that's all they can have. So what the other thing that's lurking here is there's, I suspect, in the vicinity of thousands to tens of thousands to even more firearms that are about to need to be confiscated because you won't be able to get a proper support letter to go with this. Even if you accept the tracking app that they're going to put on you to do this, and the farmer accepts that, there's only 5 spots there. So there's going to be a whole heap of people, a whole heap of firearms that go missing there. So there's a lot to be tested here. Legally is very important to make sure there's a proper challenge. Expecting the groups that you're with that have never legally challenged anything to do something different is fool's gold. It's not going to happen. So very worthwhile, and Kate. And the other side of things is getting together as a large group of people. I've suggested the Shooters Union, in particularly over here, it's the West Australian Shooters Union, but whether it's this West Australian or national, I've suggested that. I'm not saying that is the best place. That's the only place I've found. I have not, every time I say, if there's something better, put it back. There's crickets. I don't hear a damn thing. So my comment is to become a member, but it's not just to become a member of that organisation as it stands now. What I'm saying is, if enough of us join, and enough of us are not only prepared to be financial members, but also committee members or board members or whatever it is, and be that just on email, just on conference calls or whatever it is, but to be part of the machine that does this, to grow it into a bigger thing than what it is now. Grow it into something. It already has lots of contacts. It already has people that do these sort of things, but it very much comes from, or my understanding of the organisation, it comes from wanting to represent shooters. So if there are really good people that I'm sure our community has that are capable of doing even more, then they should be getting a seat at the table. And that's part of what this has to happen. That's part of what the Constitution, their bylaws and that side of things need to stand for. So I'm actually talking about taking something, and if from my understanding, they're very willing to go down that road and lift into that sort of stuff. But we have to find that group, whatever it is. Even if it was create our own group from something else, we have to, I suppose I would say, unless of course your firearms you're happy to take as just a part-time thing that you're happy to stop shortly. If you're happy within the next 5 years to lose all your firearms because, okay, you just have to give them up and get another hobby, like Mr. Papalia said, then okay, don't worry about it. Then that's just fine. And they'll tell you when you can stop using your firearms because that's their plan. If you're not happy doing that, or even if you are not a firearms owner and you're not happy with the government being able to just simply, oh, we'll put together a little plan and we'll do this and we'll just make it all happen and then we'll tell them what they can do, well then I think becoming a member of this sort of group. So that may be whether that's legal teams or that's fundraising people or that's PR people or it's whatever, they're all needed on this side of the fence. They're all needed to change this, to turn this ship around and start to get in the right direction. Anyway, I suppose there's probably another 10,000 things I can go on about. I'd finish on my comment is, yes, we need to get together and organise a strategy to turn this back around and turn it into something and it's not just about firearms owners by any means. As I said many times, this should be about a bad government is what you're talking about, and firearms are just a good example of that. If we can get a larger group, that would be great. Immediately, we need to come strong. The firearms owners need to become a strong group. To test this legally is super, super important. I desperately hope it doesn't have to get to where people have to be sacrificed so that then the law is actually implemented and then that can be used as an example to fight against it. But I don't know the process, and hopefully if you follow Kate, that she's certainly getting back to with what's actually happening, and hopefully there's a good strategy that comes from, I think she's got a member of the King's Council, and she's got a legal team as well, but to get together where they can come up and they can start to read the legalese, go through the process and see what they can actually use against this, how far this is breaking laws that are actually written versus laws that we all presumed. So that's really important. And I suppose there's, for all the people that are commiserating or that want to start pointing fingers that they didn't do it right, or they didn't do, or they're not helping me, or that sort of stuff, stop and realize that this is a very awkward situation. This is where maybe you expected something of an organisation which they were never cut out to do. There's no point blaming what groups do well, they do well. What they don't do well, they don't do at all. So understand that, and certainly when it comes to joining a group or spending a bit of money around the time or at different places, certainly that's what we've got to do. We've all got to do that. That may be a little bit of fishing. That may be a little bit of, okay, I put some money here, but they didn't really help, and we've got to go again. Don't know. It's going to come down to how invested we are all at it. And like I said, this is a far bigger fight. If you stop and think about the things that are actually happening, this is a far bigger fight than just our firearms. And yet our firearms are more than just firearms to us. It's very important to us. So anyway, guys, that's what I can tell you. Leave all your comments and bits and pieces below on that side of things. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to largely stay out of it. I'm going to acknowledge that side of things. I suppose there is a comment I'd like to say, sort of an end there. But for those folks who say, oh, well, West Australia, you just got what you voted for. So you voted for that, so you're just going to have to suck it up and do that. Listen, I've sort of heard enough of that sort of stuff, whether you're talking about whatever country it is and blaming the whole crew for what the majority went for. A democracy works, or whatever it is you call it, if you want to call it a democracy, works as we get what the majority vote for. Not what you voted for. As an individual, and certainly as a small group as shooters are, 90,000 people, even if all of us were awake, and of course that's never going to be the case, can't influence with our vote what 3.5 million people state do. It's not something that's mathematically even likely. There have to be from a lot more connection. I think probably part of West Australia's problem is there is a large group of Labor voters that still think they're voting for the party of Bob Hawke. Back 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when it was in a world where the state, where the Labor Party was for the working class man, it was for Australia First, it was all those bits and pieces. A very, very different Labor Party. So those people haven't woken up to the fact that the Labor Party has moved out from underneath them. And we also, in the world of a grip all over the world, it seems to be turning around, and maybe it's turning around a little bit here. I think not. I think WA is a little bit behind on that thing. But the progressive movement and all the things that the progressive movement have to offer. So there's that world there. You put those into that place here, and you end up with a more move to the Greens, and you end up with a little bit of moving away, but Labor still being in very strong. So there certainly is, from the sleeping to the progressive, and it's a really hard fight. We have to get a lot more strength. I guarantee you there's even going to be gun owners that voted for Labor because they've always voted Labor because they think along the Labor is for the working class man. It isn't that anymore. Waking them up is going to take our effort as well. But my big picture out of that sort of stuff is this comment of you get what you vote for. No, you don't. Not in democracy. You get what the majority vote for. If you're not part of the majority, you're probably not getting what you voted for. Anyway, that's just the nature of it. The political answer was only, as I said, really a Hail Mary. The other answers are in challenging the laws, are in getting together as a group with power, a large group, ultimately turning our power of our group and helping other groups and them getting to us, so then we have a larger portion of the population. These are very important things to do. Whether that's lobbying for the next election, or that's lobbying in decisions in between, or that's simply the might of enough power of an organisation, I don't know. But it's certainly stuff we've got to work on. It's certainly, I believe, in various forms of positive propaganda, very important. But as for where we're right now, it's pretty scary times. It's time to knuckle under. It's time to work harder. It's time to find some strength and go forward. So listen, I think we can do it, but it's not going to be easy. So it's like I said, it's time to get to work. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for checking in. Hope you liked the video, and we'll catch you next time.